Hello, welcome to episode 5 of my OO9 build. Now, my workmen for the railway need somewhere to live, so I've built them a cottage. Come see what a pain it was to build.
In the last episode, I was building this riverbed. I've been waiting for it to dry, so let's see how we get on. I've got a suspicion it'll be as hard as nails.
It's been, I think, 3, maybe 4 days now to try and get this to dry. I think it's November. Get it dry in less than a week, I think, is probably a miracle, especially in these cold conditions. So, yeah, you know, since I don't have the privilege of a bedroom to build a layout in anymore, because apparently children have got to live in them. Anyway, I'm going to try and sand this down. That is tough as nails, so this might not be as easy as the bag described it. I'll give it a bit of a sand down, I'll run the wire brush over it, and we're going to see what the outcome is. It might just look like this at this rate. So, I've tried sanding this down. It is hard as nails. It sanded a little bit where the sort of lumps of paper was sticking up here. It sanded off a little bit, but it's really tough. I mean, it was only a fine grit sandpaper I'm using. Maybe something a bit more coarse will have a better effect. There's still a few lumps actually I can see here. Cover out the scenics. I tried using the wire brush. It just made a bit of a dust, didn't do much. I am glad I didn't use sculpture mould for the mountains, because of no way would I have got this effect using this stuff. This stuff is definitely for a more smooth hillside where you're going to have a field or something like that on there. It's fine for this riverbed because obviously it's where all the soil's been washed down from the hill into the river, so that's not going to be a problem. I'm going to move on to painting it. I'm also going to keep the heater on to try and dry that area, so hopefully I can get that painted, but I doubt that's going to get done this evening. But when that's all done, probably go over this again with another coat of paint just to cover up these white patches everywhere. They're just little flecks. I don't even think the camera picks them up, but I can see them here. And I don't want to spoil the effect, so I'd rather just go over it now, do it again. Once done that, I've got some black card that I'm going to use for the edging to go around and tidy the layout up. And hopefully after that, I do believe I can then move on to the scenic side, scatters, trees and the rest of the buildings. So let's start painting the riverbed. So, I've been back over the layout with the paintbrush. This side's a bit a slightly lighter shade of grey because I felt it was a bit too dark before, but I think it's blended quite well. It's giving it a nice bit of shadow in places, and I'm really pleased with the effect now. Definitely looks like slate to me. I've painted the riverbed. It's a bit sketchy. I did it brown, and I just put some of the grey paint that I had left over just over the top of the brown, and I've gone back over with the brush and just went over there. So I'm just going to let this dry off. I need to sort of look at pictures of streams and rivers around North Wales just to get the right colour before I decide on a final fix for that. But that will do for now. So that's everything painted. Let it dry off. Hopefully these little white spots that were turning up in the plasterwork will no longer appear. And then I'm just going to put the edging around the layout, and then we can move on to scenics. So I wasn't happy with the second coat of the rock face. I felt it was too dark. The trouble is I looked at various photos of slate, rock faces, and there's such varying colour. It's very difficult to sort of judge what's right. Got a bit of slate from the garden and compared it, and it was pretty much a match on colour, but it still felt, I don't know, a bit too dark. So I've gone over this again for a third coat, and I've put a lot lighter tones of greys and browns on it. It's still a good match to the slate, so I'm not too far off, although I still think it's a little off from what I actually want. But it's probably because it currently looks like, you know, a zebra crossing of various tones, because obviously I've just done streaks down. But once I put the scatter materials on, I think that should sort of blend it out, and it should give it a better look. Anything that's exposed I'm not happy with, I'll probably just dry brush over with some light browns and some light greys, just to give a bit more tonal variety in the rock face. The other issue is, for some reason, some parts of it were very shiny. I've used acrylic paint, so I'm not quite sure where the shine had come from, so I've sprayed it over with some matte varnish to tone it down a bit. It's worked a little bit, but I think again, once the scenics are on, I just need to go over any exposed areas and just probably put some weathering powders on there too to tone it down. So next task, before I move on to the job of the scenics and adding the buildings, is I just want to tidy up this edge around the layout, because it's all a bit scruffy at the moment. So I've gone and bought some black card from Hobbycraft, and I'm just going to simply just put it around the side, draw around it, cut it out, glue it on, and hopefully that'll give a nice tidy appearance to the edge of the layout. So, the black card is now on to complete the fascia of the layout. It definitely looks a lot smarter, a lot tidier. It looks quite nice. I've done around the fiddle yard area as well, so I've done the bottom down here where the wires were exposed, and then I've put a piece of card just above the hole where the fiddle yard is, and then I had a spare piece of N-gauge back seam that I've applied to the card, and then just put that just above the mounting line just to sort of complete the picture. I was a little concerned it might come out a bit bumpy, because around here there was a little too much of the, and it's a Dulux Materials back seam glue I used, which is pretty much like a wallpaper paste, and it was just a little too thick there. So when it was originally applied, the backing paper did sort of warp a little, but that's dried out and settled down. That looks quite good now. I've also just had a bit of spare black card from doing this, so I've cut a piece out here and put it in the tunnel mouth, so you can no longer see the hole in the side where the power lead will go through to the controller. So it improves the illusion of the tunnel going into the mountain. And I've also done a little bit more around here for the same, just to try and cover up sort of the exposed fiddle yard behind through the tunnel mouth.
With the layout build now complete, it was time to move on to the scenery, and in particular the buildings that were required for the layout. In the previous video, when I was waiting for the polyfilling to dry, I worked on this church. That's just one of the buildings that I want for the layout. On the other side to the church, above the tunnel, near the viaduct, I intend to have a cottage scene. Originally, I'd purchased these Dapol kits and built the cottages in a similar style to an article I'd seen by Chris Lee in Model Rail magazine. I'd taken the two kits and glued them together. But as I progressed and worked through this, as you can see, I did do some footage for it, I realised that these cottages are not suitable for what I want. I was intending to change the thatch roof for a slate roof, but the more I looked at it, I realised that the dormers would also need adapting. It's timber framed on the outside, so the whole walls would need a slate covering to look like slate or stone built walls. I had Googled other cottages in North Wales, and the only, as I think they're called, magpie style cottages I could find was in Wrexham, which I felt was out of the range of where I want to model. So I'd abandoned the idea of using these, and I'll probably use them for a different project. And I've opted for this, which is a Wills stone cottage kit. So I'm going to start building this. Let's see how well it goes together. So I've opened up the kit and there is a lot of instructions. And it appears that this type of kit is one where you're going to have to follow the plans and cut the sheet material to make the cottage. So I've never actually done a kit like this before. I'm usually used to the ones where it's pre-formed, such as these Dapol kits, and you just glue sides together and jobs are good. And so I'm trying to open these plastic bags, confirm my suspicions. Let's see what we've got building material wise. Try not to lose the parts. There we go. So yeah, we've got garden walls, pavement, floorboards, and yeah, stone sheets. So these sheets are going to have to be cut to these measurements, to the right size, to make the building. So this could be quite interesting. I've never done this before. I'm going to have a look through the instructions, have a good read through. When I feel confident enough to put a knife to this, I'll come back to you. I started off by marking up the measurements on the back of the building sheet. A lesson I learnt very early on from this kit was to double check the measurements. As you can see here, I've drawn the windows and doors of the ground floor, and then I've drawn the windows for the upper floor off the top of the sheet. However, I didn't check the measurements to see that the sheet needed reducing in height before putting the top windows in. Thankfully, this could be easily rectified, but another kit may have had more disastrous results. Once the sheet was marked out, I proceeded in cutting all the windows and doors out. It really was a case of trial and error. My first attempt was on one of the windows, drilling 4 corners and then cutting between each hole until the window came out, but due to the thickness of the sheet, this took some time. The doors were slightly easier. They could be cut out with a razor saw. But for the rest of the windows I was going to need a new method that would make my life a lot easier. The remaining windows were cut out by drilling the holes around the rough shape of the window itself. I then used a knife to cut out the material, and then any waste was filed down to the proper shape. So it's been several days since I started the kit. Obviously it hadn't taken me several days, I've just been building this on and off. I have now managed to cut all the windows out. I've got to be honest, I don't like using Wills modelling sheets. I think it's too thick to work with. I prefer thinner plastic embossed sheet. However, that's how the kit came, and I persevered. I've now got all the parts cut out. I've glued the chimney stacks together, so they're ready to go. The roofs have cut out, I just haven't cut the holes for the chimney stacks. I will measure that up once they are in place to make sure that I get a nice tight snug fit. And the same for the flooring that's got to go in the middle. That won't be cut until I measure out the actual size of the inner walls, just to make sure that's a perfect fit as well. So, with everything now ready, I'm going to start gluing this kit, and hopefully it's going to start looking like a couple of cottages. The kit came with more corner braces than you're ever going to need for it, and so therefore I used some of them to go above the windows and doors to hold up the next story floor. So here we are. It's been an effort to get it to this stage, but the walls are now up. The upstairs floor is in, the chimneys are on. So I'm now going to let the glue just set, harden, and then I'm going to fill the gaps between the chimney and the wall. Just file the corners so the stonework matches. Once that's done, I'm then going to paint the stonework before proceeding to adding the roof and the windows.
blend the chimney breast of the wall, I just took a bit of Squadron Putty filler, my favourite brand, and just ran down the side.
So I've now built the kit for the wall part anyway, and I've given it a coat of primer. I've also done the same with the church, so that's now primed up as well. So before I move on to adding the windows and doors, etc., I'm going to paint both these kits. To do this, I'm going to use the Life Colour stone paint range, which includes reddish stone, brown stone, green stone, blue stone, etc. I'm also going to be using their other debris and rubble set. That's got some good colours in there. It's like deposited dust, broken plaster, lime mortar, which is very good for doing the mortar. I think it's a perfect colour for that. So first things first, I'm going to start on the house. I'm going to give it a coat of lime mortar for the mortar lines, and then paint the stonework in afterwards.
Once the lime mortar had been applied, I used brown stone and the broken tile to pick out some of the larger stones on the building. Once I picked out the larger stonework, I then got various colours and a sponge to do the rest. Dabbing each colour over and blending them in, this was a really effective method of getting the stonework look that I wanted. Once the various paints had been applied, I went back over the highlighted stonework and picked it out again, before blending that in with the sponge method. And here's the arsenal of paints I used to get the stone effect on these cottages. You don't have to use as many paints as I have used here, but the various shades do give nice subtle tones between each colour. So this is the stonework now done, and I'm very pleased with how that's come out. I think that's quite effective using the sponge to get the effect of the various tones in the stonework. I've also painted the floorboards for upstairs, and I'll be adding the interior walls at some point. So now I've painted this stonework, I'm going to move on to the church and paint that. The walls of the church were painted in the same method as the walls of the cottages, taking the various shades of colours that I had and dabbing them on with a sponge. The window reveals were picked out with the red sandstone colour. And the bell tower was delicately painted by picking out each individual brick in various different tones. Once the bell tower was done, it was time for the roof to get a coat of paint. So I've painted the church roof with rail match slate, and then I've just picked out the drain pipe and guttering with some humble black and painted the cross just in a leather brown shade. Windows need to be added, but otherwise this church is pretty much done. Stonework's not come out too bad. I don't think it's as good as the cottage, but I think it still looks all right. So with that done, I'll get back onto the cottage. But that was a lie. The morning after, I wasn't satisfied with the tone of the roof, and so therefore decided to paint it again, starting off with green stone and blending it with blue stone and brown stone to give it a varied weathered effect. Back to the cottage, and I'd started doing the upstairs bedrooms by using some mount board to make the dividers for each individual room. The drawing suggested that this was a 4-bedroom cottage, but the rooms just seemed too small, so I opted for a 3-bedroom cottage in the end instead. Now, before moving on to adding the details, the instructions suggested adding the interior walls. So to go along with the walls, I felt, well, it seemed a little silly just to have the walls inside, so I've added a little bit of detail. So these are the master bedrooms, as you can see. I've got a double bed, pictures on the walls, and then I've made some cabinets and drawers just with a bit of balsa wood, just cut to size and glued together. If I turn it around, you can see the other bedrooms. Now originally the plans designed this as a 4-bedroom house, but that just seemed a little too cramped. Because when I tried making like beds and that, they barely fit in the bedrooms. As you can see, they just squeeze in to these rooms here. So I opted to make it a 3-bedroom house rather than a 4-bedroom house. So that's the upstairs interior done. And I needed to do that so I can add the roof. The downstairs one is a little bit easier because I just insert that underneath. So I can now move on to do the windows, etc. for the detailing.
I then decided to put the ceiling in for the upstairs, and because I wanted the interior detail to be seen, I also added a couple of lights. This was stupid for 2 reasons. One, as you can see, it was very difficult to add the glazing, and 2, once the roof was applied, the lighting didn't really work very well because I only cut 3 holes in top of the card. It came out in the end. But once the ceiling was rectified, the lighting effect worked really well, and the interior detail could be seen superbly. The next job would be to paint the roof. With the success of how the church turned out, I decided to use the exact same method on the cottage. With the roof painted, there was one more job to do, and that was to make the downstairs interior. I realised, as the hallway wouldn't be able to be seen, or the bathroom, that I only really needed to concentrate on the 2 kitchens and living rooms. It was basic detail, but just enough that if you peered through the window, it looked like someone was living there.
So here we are. I have finally finished this cottage. And I've just checked the timestamps on the videos, and it has taken me 3 weeks to get here. So you can see it's considerably different from the last shot. I've added the chimney pots, the windows and the glazing in. I've added interior, and I've added interior lighting. Let's come a bit closer, you can see inside. There's Fred having a sit down. Go across to his neighbour, Paul, upstairs. He's just getting changed. And then we can turn the house round just to view the back. Going in the kitchen there, bedroom lights are on here, and there's Doris just at the kitchen there. So with the roof, one of the things the kit said was to add some tin foil to go around the edge. Now I tried this, but the foil just didn't want to cut, it just kept tearing. So in the end I used the foil wrapper from a Kinder bar. So I had a paper backing on it, and this made it a lot easier to cut and to shape. So I've just put that round the edge of the chimneys for the lead flashing. The roof I've then added a bit of weathering powder, and then the same with the doors and around the bottom of the house. Drain pipes as well. And a little bit on the guttering. The other thing to note with the guttering is when it comes in the kit, it's got quite a thick lip on the back of it to allow you to attach to the roof, but it meant that the gutter was actually sitting out quite far. So you can just see here, it's a bit wonky, but I have cut the guttering back just so it sits under the roof better. And I've weathered that a little bit as well, although I went too far on the roof here, but I'll cover that up. However, that is now the cottage finished, ready to go on the layout. Although I'm not quite sure how I'm going to wire up these lights. We'll worry about that later.
So I worked out how to get the cable for the lights in. I've just basically, I punctured a hole using a paintbrush because this stuff is really soft. Bit difficult to get through the foil, but just a bit of persistence and you get there. Once I've done that, I measured up how far in from each point here, so I can then measure the other side to drill a hole. And then once I got that, just poke the straw through here so I can feed the wires straight through and out the other end. So I'm just going to trim the straw. And then take my wires and just feed them through the straw. They are. Well, I would if I could. Just feed through to the bottom now. Blue one's there, there's the orange one. And the reason I use the straw is because it's quite a good guide to getting the wires through. Because when I've tried to do it with the point motors before, trying to push them through the hole, sometimes they'll catch on the insulation board. And they won't go down, so the straw helps with that. I'll just put the house sort of back there. That's roughly where that's going to go. Also got the church. I've added the glazing. I've just put a bit of sort of mucky sort of paint just behind the glazing because I haven't done an interior for it. I might do an interior, although I certainly think I'm going to put a light in there. One of the kids had one of those little LED flickering fake tea lights. Put it in the church and it looked really effective, so I'm going to look at wiring up one of them to put inside the church, but that's where that's going to go. And that is two of the main buildings done for this layout. I still need to build the station. I'm going to have a little signal box and level crossing here, and I still need to work in this quarry area here. But I think these two buildings have taken long enough for this episode alone. This, as I say, has taken me 3 weeks to get to this stage. I mean, it's on and off. I've got work in between and looking after the kids, etc. But it's come out really nice, but it wasn't quite the fast project I was after. But it is a nice kit. As I say, I'm not a fan of the Wills boards. I find that they're too thick to work with. It's one of the reasons why it took so long to make this kit. But I'm pleased with the results. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know at least 1,300 of you have now. I'd like to thank you for subscribing to the channel. It's been amazing. I can't believe how quickly it's grown over the last few weeks. If you have enjoyed the content and you haven't subscribed, then please do. You don't have to. If not, just at least click the like button. Let other people know that this video is out there. So next time I'll be doing this.
Next time I try painting some track, before painting track, and then testing the track.
Again, that's all for now. Everyone would like to say thank you to everyone for watching. See you next time.